Welcome, everybody. My name is Mia Edidin. I am the Clinical Director at Perinatal Support Washington, and really thrilled to have you all here today to think about mental health during pregnancy and its impact across the perinatal period. A couple of quick things. Perinatal Support Washington is a statewide nonprofit focusing on supporting parents around the emotional transition. We have several key programs. The first is our statewide warm line. Our warm line is available Monday through Friday, 9 to 4:30 in English and Spanish. And on evening and weekends, we do callback, so we don't offer live answer. And the warm line is a place where parents or providers can call to get access to resources anywhere in Washington state. We provide referrals to support groups and mental health providers. We also find warm connections for parents in a variety of other needs that they might be having in the moment. And our warm line is staffed by parents who have experienced and recovered from a perinatal mood or anxiety disorder. So it's a peer-based program. And then PS Washington also offers a variety of other services to Washington state providers. Our other statewide program is our clinical therapy program, which is a telehealth program. We accept all Medicaid plans and offer sliding scale and free and no cost services for low-income families, and is created as a low or no barrier support service for families. So please, all of our services are available on our website. You're welcome to find out more. And then lastly, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the program that is funding this webinar here today. The program is called the Perinatal Mental Health Initiative, and the goal of the program is to create supports for families across the state so that families can access providers who are knowledgeable and trained in perinatal mental health. And it provides funding for training like this. So we provide 4 webinars a year, and the webinars are for anyone who works with childbearing people in Washington state. And the goal is, if we provide you all with good training and support to support parents, then parents get better support and access to care. And there's a few other things that the Perinatal Mental Health Initiative does. We offer 2 two-day trainings across the state that are available to providers. And the 2-day trainings are a pretty comprehensive overview of perinatal mental health. Again, it's open to any provider or any professional working with childbearing people. And then we work very closely with 11 communities across the state to help them establish broader services available for families. So some of the work that the Perinatal Mental Health Initiative does is create perinatal mental health task forces in each of those 11 communities. So those communities create a task force that is comprised of parents who have lived experience, and then the wide range of providers that work with childbearing people. So that might include mental health providers, hospital providers, case managers, public health, WIC, kind of all of the folks that interact with people in the childbearing period. And the goal of the task force is to talk about how can we better support the mental health of pregnant and postpartum people. So it's a very exciting program. And one of the things that it does is think about the systems that serve parents and professionals in each of those 11 communities. The 11 communities are counties. They might be communities that are about particular lived experience. So one of the communities that we're working with are ESIT providers. So folks that work with kiddos that are in the early intervention services and training ESIT providers to identify perinatal mood and anxiety disorders and talk about how that system can better support the emotional health of parents. So that's just one example of the 11 communities that we work across the state. So that's kind of my quick overview about the funding. It is through the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, specifically the Strengthening Families Washington team. So without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce Lauren Perez, who's a clinical psychologist, who's both a perinatal mental health specialist and an infant mental health specialist. And one of the reasons why we invited her here was really to think about that intersection so that we're not working in either the perinatal mental health or infant mental health world in silos, but really building bridges and talking about how we can think about both of those ways of thinking and working. So I'm going to ask Lauren to introduce herself and share a little bit more about her clinical framework and what she'll be talking with us about today. Lauren, welcome.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for taking the time to be here today. I have been to several webinars where people just talk at me. And so if people want to be a little bit more interactive, please feel free to do so. And if you are willing to do that, please turn on your cameras. I would love to see all your faces if you want to talk more. And I can also appreciate that sometimes we just need a little bit of time off screen, because in this pandemic COVID time, I know that we have all been on screen more than we were probably ever used to. I invite any children, if there are children in the home or pets, please feel free to bring them on or have them come by. Totally appreciate that too. I want to ground us a little bit in some of our conversation today, and just share a little bit about my identity and sort of journey here. And I'll also incorporate that a little bit into our time and space together. I am a bilingual, bicultural, Latinx, Spanish-speaking, female-identified person. I have been in the work for longer than I think I put into numbers in different ways. Part of that was even before my sort of professional academic career, and before sort of just working in different community-based settings as a volunteer. And so that has really sort of brought me into this space and working during pregnancy and with young children and their caregivers. When I share with people that I work with children, they often say, oh, well, how do you work with them so young? And it's quite amazing, right, that we are able to do that. And one of the things that I often say is that they don't come without an adult person. And so it's really sort of working with the adults, working with the children together. And oftentimes it's with other family members, other community providers. And so really sort of working in a team-based perspective that's systems involved and sort of incorporated. A lot of my training has been in community-based settings, in hospital-based settings, outpatient settings, as well as some inpatient settings as well. That sort of goes with my perinatal work. Currently, I work at San Francisco General Hospital in San Francisco, and it's a hospital that is predominantly Medi-Cal based. And so a lot of the recipients of our care really do need a lot of extra support, and it's really sort of working with community-based providers. As a bilingual person, a lot of my caseload has been predominantly monolingual Spanish-speaking families that have immigrated here from different places in Latin America, in Mexico, Central America, a number of different places. And so it's really sort of bringing myself and some of my expertise in working with that population also. I've done some training in infant mental health along the way, specifically with the infant parent program, and also with another hospital-based initiative called the Solid Start Initiative. That's the other half of my predominant work. I have been registered as a child parent psychotherapist also, and have gone through that rostering process, and really have delved into the perinatal field in that way as well, and really sort of thinking about baby in mind throughout the pregnancy period, and sort of bringing baby into the room in a particular way. And I love the work that I do. It's challenging work, and I really appreciate the people that work with the families that we all sort of support in different ways, and appreciate that we often work with many, many disciplines. And so wanting to hold that in this space and time, because I imagine that there are people here from many different walks and ways that we work with families. I definitely welcome questions along the way. You can please feel free to unmute or direct the messages to Mia in the chat. That will be supporting me to hold that as well. And I will start sharing my screen and look at a PowerPoint with you together. And again, please feel free. I want this to be as interactive as feels helpful to each and every one of you. Okay. You guys are all seeing my slides. Perinatal, mental health, and attachment. Here we go.
Looks
So you
like
wanna-
we can also see the upcoming slides. We might be
The
seeing the
presenter
presenter
view?
view.
Okay.
Yeah.
There we go. So together today, I really want to frame the conversation and then think about where the baby is in pregnancy. That's really important to me in my work, and just holding in mind where sort of we are in place and time. And then we'll look at the impact on mental health, perinatal mental health concerns, the dyadic impact when there are perinatal health concerns and otherwise, really sort of a team-based approach. And then again, sort of bringing it back to the birthing person and baby, and in particular, wanting to sort of think about where we might encounter a birthing person and a baby together, and sort of at what intersection that might be and the frequency of those encounters. And then I have a case to share with you all. It's a multi-generational family, and then we'll have time for some questions. And again, please feel free to bring in questions along the way. So a little bit about me. I identify as a dyadic infant parent psychotherapist, amongst many other things, but really sort of a dyadic therapist. I really work to hold the baby and the adult person in mind and who is around them. I think I've shared that I'm bilingual, bicultural, and for me, sort of bringing that lens into the conversation of the person that I'm meeting, and not sort of like a cookie cutter way, but rather a way that really sort of identifies who I'm with that person. I often think about people that I'm working with and them wanting to know a little bit more about me, who I come from, and I really try to sit in that space and in their wonderings to think about where their question is coming from and to learn a little bit more. Some of the theoretical frameworks are really around a more psychodynamic oriented theory, sort of wondering with the person, but also really sort of diving into the family that I'm working with and what they bring from their own histories, and thinking about sort of historical trauma, the ways that trauma has impacted any one particular culture and family, and in the particular society that they may currently be a part of. Again, I work with a lot of families that have immigrated from different places, and thinking about how that intersection has impacted their acculturation here, and how our sort of mainstream view of acculturation and how that might be different than that particular family. I think about therapy in the kitchen as Selma Freiberg sort of theory, and really thinking about where is therapy done or not done? Is it sort of like on the way to escort them somewhere, to show them a tour of a different unit, to show them where the bathroom is? I mean, things happen in really spontaneous ways. I also have a lot of experience working within homes and community-based settings. And so does that mean sort of having conversations with a family there in the moment on the bus, at the bus stop, or in their kitchen? That might be in a family setting with many other participants there, whether or not they may be participating, or little ones that might be running around. I think about the ghosts and angels, and those are both Selma Freiberg and Leisha Lieberman sort of concepts that really come from ways of thinking about how historical trauma and intergenerational trauma impacts the person that might be in front of us, and may also impact the attributions that might be placed upon the baby that is with us in the room. And then the flip side of that is the angels that might come in. So those figures that really might be heroes in a way for that particular person that has endured trauma, and wanting to sort of hold those in mind also. We often hear about all of the bad things, and it's important for us to wonder about any positive figures that might be around as well. The other component that has really shaped the way that I think about things is the parent-child relationship competencies. This is something from Maria St. John, who is a former supervisor, a current colleague, and a mentor, and really thinking about a bidirectional way of looking at a dyad and thinking about ways that mutual engagement, mutual attunement, health and well-being go from the child or the baby that is in utero to the adult, and then from that adult back to that baby or child that might be present. And then the settings that we're in. Some of us have the luxury of meeting families in an ongoing way, and others of us really have to sort of be in the moment and are with somebody in an inpatient setting, and it might be brief, and it might only be one sort of interaction, and others might be a few more times than that. But sometimes we don't have the opportunity to work with families on an ongoing, long-standing basis. I will take a pause to take a breath for myself, and also to see if there's anyone in the audience that wants to ask any questions, has anything in mind, or just wants to sort of come into the conversation a little bit. And I'll ask Mia to just help with that.
There's nothing in the chat.
Perfect. Okay. One of the guiding principles that I always ask and sort of ground myself in meeting somebody, a pregnant person in particular, a birthing person, is where is the baby? And for our conversation, where is the baby in pregnancy? And this can be sort of a metaphorical question, a question that is very sort of front and present in mind. But the things that impact this question are the gestational age of the person that we are meeting. Sometimes we meet people very early in pregnancy. And again, whether or not that's ongoing or sort of in the moment, I think about public health nurses sometimes when they get referrals, they can get them very early. I think about people that are sort of parent advocates and can again meet somebody early or later on. And so that really sort of helps us understand where we are in the conversation with any one particular person. The other piece that is incredibly important is around whether or not this pregnancy was something that was planned or unexpected, an unexpected surprise. And I think if we think about the medical field, this can be a question that can feel a little bit judgmental to some families. And so I hold a lot of grace in asking that question, and really spend a little bit of time trying to understand how this pregnancy came to be and how this person that is in front of me is engaging in that pregnancy, because that's very important for us to sort of hold in mind for this baby. In that question, there may be some attributions that might be associated for that baby. And so that's one of the things that I'm really listening for early on and thinking about how to sort of incorporate down the line in my treatment planning with this birthing person, and to think about the baby. And again, sort of this framing question for me is, where is the baby in that thought process? The other thing that I hold in mind is the history of pregnancies. And the reason why this is a really important part is because oftentimes, if there is a history of pregnancy loss, this could also impact the way that this current pregnancy may be seen. Is there a way that this history of pregnancy, and if there were potential losses of pregnancies, is there a way that that is impacting the person that is currently pregnant? Sometimes what I see is, well, I have 2 children, and that is great to learn about someone. And this is this will be my 3rd child. And so learning that's information, but then learning about, well, how many times have you actually been pregnant? Well, I have been pregnant 5 other times. And so learning about that it's important for us to know, again, to learn whether or not there are attributions to this current baby, whether or not there has been a process for the birthing person to share that they have grieved and lost another baby, or that it was unexpected in some way, and learning about that a little bit more. Another important part is their living situation. And this is information that I gather in order to sort of learn where this baby might be going. Is this someone that needs access to housing resources? Is this somebody that lives in a multi-generational family and will have additional support? Is this somebody that has a partner that has left and then will be sort of navigating this pregnancy by themselves, will be navigating bringing the baby home by themselves and sort of imagining there. And in that, we can learn about their natural supports, as well as whether or not there are other supports that need to be made and built in that time. I think about this as sort of, if I think about it in a visual form, as a tree, right? So how is this family rooted? How can we extend and help this tree grow to grow branches and leaves so that this baby has the best the chance possible? And oftentimes there's families that come in and out of care, and so how to support them in that, and how to really sort of gather up a team to be able to support the family in that process as well. Impact on mental health. What we know about mental health is that mental health is very complicated. There can be personal histories of mental health, familial histories of mental health that really do have an impact on the birthing person's current mental health status. And this can oftentimes be a difficult question, and it might be difficult to gather information is what comes to mind for me. And sometimes it's difficult because there is a lot of stigma around mental health, generally speaking. And if we think about it from a cultural perspective, that may also be something that's impacting. And there can be shame and guilt around previous sort of mental health experiences, as well as the experience of actually needing to get help. Another big impact on mental health can be health. Is this birthing person, somebody that has gestational diabetes and so is being seen for antenatal testing a little bit more? Is this somebody that is having other sort of stressors that are impacting their own health? And this might be something that is longstanding, or it might be something sort of just in this gestational period. And then again, around sort of the question around natural supports, living situation, are there other psychosocial stressors that are happening for this birthing person? Are there financial stressors? Are there stressors related to housing? Are there stressors related to the other children that might be involved in this family? And so how can we understand a little bit more? Again, in part to gather more supports and really make sure that this dyad doesn't fall through the cracks and is being held by us as professionals and in a team network. So some of the perinatal mood concerns that might come up, and one of the things that I want to say is that some of these mood disorders happen during the postpartum period. Some of them happen earlier on. Some of them can be long-standing concerns, and some of them are really spontaneous things that people could not have anticipated in different ways. I'm sure this list could grow, but I just wanted to sort of highlight some of the things that we can see. So depression, anxiety, postpartum depression, panic is something that can come up that we don't sort of know about before. It might be something that might be brand new during this pregnancy. OCD can come up in different ways. One of the things that I've actually seen that I didn't include is sort of needle phobia. And so how is that impacting health, arriving to appointments? I think about post-traumatic stress, and this can be something that can be more on the complex side, or something that can be actually related to sort of our hospital settings, or just being able to being systems involved as well. There's many sort of avenues that this comes from. Bipolar, psychosis, again, is there sort of a family history that we should be aware of? Are there previous psychotic episodes that have happened in this person's life? And how do we intersect, intervene? How do we provide support without being judgmental, and offer sort of a lending hand? And then the complicated grief and loss, in particular around other pregnancies, whether or not this person has a history of miscarriage, and how do we support this person to sort of thinking about the here and now and the present and being present. This is reminding me of a case that I have been supervising, where we have been in this person's life for about 15 weeks now, and we met this person very early in pregnancy, but had a history of pregnancy loss. And this person doesn't really want to get ready for the baby, but the baby is coming, and we know that. And she's into her, she's actually at full term now. She's at 37 plus. And we are really trying to think about ways to mourn the loss of the baby that she wanted so badly, and also really be present for this current baby that is coming, and we know is coming very, very soon. So again, these are just some of the things that we might sort of look out for. Some of the questions that I really sort of try to gather around this time about whether or not there have been mood concerns in the past, whether or not there is significant worry, is really around some of the things that we all know are important: sleep, eating, arrival to appointments. And there's different ways to ask these questions. How often are you sleeping? Do you feel like you're getting enough rest? Do you feel like you're eating enough for you and the baby? I think I really try to frame a lot of questions in a dyadic way that's incorporating the adult person, the birthing person, and the baby, always sort of holding that baby in mind. And again, where is the baby in this person's sort of thought process? And how can we help support the reminder that there is a baby and there is a baby coming? And the dyadic impact. What we know is that when the baby is there, there is a significant impact on the baby. When a person is really sad, we sometimes notice that the baby is not moving so much, or maybe there is a baby moving a lot. And so one of the things that we try to do is sort of gather a baseline. And this is similar in the ways that we might gather a baseline around sleeping, eating, sort of interest in different activities, or a loss of interest in different activities, engagement with others. And this is another really important reason to sort of have that teamwork mindset. Are there other people that we can include in the wondering about this particular family? And are there other people that are sort of alongside us in this journey with this particular family? Again, I want to hold in mind that for different people, there are different sort of levels of interaction. There are different levels of intervention. And sometimes it's in a 5-minute meeting that we are with someone, and that's the only time. And how can we sort of engage and wonder in a very short period of time, or in a period of time that is longstanding, and over time with somebody? And how do we build in other sort of preventative factors, health promoting factors, health promoting individuals, and individuals that are with us along this journey with any one particular person. So this teamwork perspective that I'm holding in mind, I always want to keep in mind sort of central is this birthing person. How are we supporting this birthing person? How are we supporting the baby and keeping the baby in mind and sort of illustrating or highlighting the baby's voice in any one particular conversation? What natural supports can we build in, if any? Some families are very fortunate in that they do have a significant amount of natural supports, and others, they are maybe new to this area, new to this country, and really don't have sort of that natural support built in. So how can we empower somebody to do that? Prenatal care, how can we engage different prenatal providers depending on the level of care that's needed for this particular family? How can we continue to build that out in different ways? Is there a public health nurse? Is that even an option? How can we sort of expand our care team and care plan? Mental health, is there behavioral health? Is there social work? How can we help this birthing person and baby sort of get the things that they need in a way that feels helpful to them? And then pediatrics, is there a way to sort of include pediatrics ahead of time? Can we ask pediatrics to, say that there is a baby coming and this is a family that we are concerned that will not make it to appointments? Maybe there is an older sibling, and so maybe this is sort of another interaction or another way of including somebody. Can we ask the pediatric team to check in when there is sort of the older sibling that might be present and available during the visits? Or catching the birthing person when they are at a different visit? How can we just sort of enlist more supports? Are there community health workers? That is a term that I use loosely, but across different settings. Are there case managers in different ways that can also be included as different sorts of support? And then sort of, again, always bringing it back to the birthing person and the baby. What does this dyad that's in front of me, what are things that they need? What are things that can be useful to them and might even engage them in more care? What are the parts that bring this dyad joy? I always ask about movement of the baby. Have they noticed? What does that feel like? Is it hard to sort of notice and sit into that space? Do you notice if the baby is moving more at any one particular time? Do you notice that the baby is moving more when you touch your belly and you feel the movement? And sort of thinking about that bi-directional mutual engagement, mutual sort of way of being attuned. If the baby is kicking, is there a way to sort of acknowledge that for the birthing person? Can the birthing person say, "Oh, baby, I noticed that you liked that music. You are more comfortable when I'm lying down and you have extra space." Sort of thinking out loud and, being able to narrate and really provide language and engagement for that particular dyad. And sometimes it's really us sort of doing that. I think about the ways that I might have a conversation with an adult person, but also might talk to their belly and say, "Oh, baby, I see that you're growing. You are taking such good care of this baby and helping them grow." So different ways of engagement and thinking. And I mean, I have worked with some families that look at me like I am really wild for talking to the belly. And then I do a little psychoeducation around that, how that language and narrating and modeling even for that birthing person might be really helpful. And to think about ways that we might be able to do that together and notice. I think about mutual engagement and attunement as a huge part of just sort of noticing what's happening. If there is a partner involved, do you notice that the baby moves more when the partner arrives home and starts talking to the belly? Does the baby sort of move more at night? My partner works really late, and all of a sudden, right around 1 in the morning when my partner might get home, that's actually when I notice the baby move more. And so thinking about that and sort of just leaning into that space and time, and wondering. Just wanting to take a pulse to see how everyone is doing and hearing this. And I welcome anybody to, chime in.
I was just gonna say, there's no questions in the chat.
Thank you, Mia. Okay. I've talked a little bit about the different sort of encounters that might come up. And when I use this word encounters, I think about the times that we might be meeting with somebody, or in this case, I'm thinking about a referral or a warm handoff. Is that the way that you're sort of coming into any one particular person's life, any one family, any one dyad's life? Is it through a referral process? Is it something that might be strongly encouraged by Human Services and that sort of agency to have sort of your support in a particular way? Is this something that the family has asked for? Is this something that the provider is really concerned about and sort of referring this family? And then how many times have we met or are we meeting with this family? And sometimes we know this early on, depending on our role and sort of experience depending on where we work. I think about colleagues that I have that work in a birth center, and while they might be social work or behavioral health, they know that their time is limited to when somebody is admitted and inpatient. Whereas I have a little bit more flexibility and luxury in that I can meet with people in an ongoing way once they're discharged in an outpatient setting. And so that can really impact the way that we engage. And sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we, might be sitting across settings and might meet people that we've met with before in different ways and sort of might come back. And then our location, and in our role, are we easily accessible? Do we have ways that a patient might be able to contact us because maybe we did have a really strong sort of interaction with any of the family, and that family really does want to sort of think with us more, and how can they reach us? And are there resources that we can sort of develop for them, with them? Does that mean walking them down the hall to another place where you might be able to meet with them? Does that mean sort of walking them and doing a warm handoff to somebody that might be able to provide additional sort of supports? I think I do see some numbers in the chat. So I wonder if, Mia, you could help me with the chat.
Yeah, I'm taking a look right now.
Thank you.
So somebody asked a question about somatic experiences. I think they were wondering what you were referring to there. And then one said, I'm associating the way you're speaking about attuning to the baby through a somatic lens.
Yeah, the person that asked about somatic experiences, could you say a little bit more about your question?
Hi. Yeah, I think I was just curious. I feel like a lot of like, I was just wondering if it was when you were talking about the mutual engagement and attunement with the baby, that was just sounding like a very like somatic model in the way that you have people notice the baby. And I was wondering if that was the correct way to look at that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a both and. I think there's definitely some somatics that come into it and sort of acknowledging what's happening in that person's body. I think about awareness in particular with some families that some birthing people that have had trauma. And so thinking about that sort of awareness also, and also from a more psychodynamic, psychoanalytic sort of framework, sort of thinking about what's happening in that sense as well. So that both and also just sort of bringing a little bit of awareness and recognition that there is a baby that is present with us. And I want to hold that from a medical model, that baby isn't sort of quote unquote recognized until they have an MRN, a medical record number. They're noted in the system. So is there a way that we can gently sort of massage that in early on and have that person, also the birthing person, notice that they are co-creating something with this baby?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, of course. And Mia, I don't know if that answered the other question as well.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, great. And so, right, I mean, I don't identify as a person that has special expertise in sort of somatic related processes. And I think a lot of our work, especially with birthing persons, is around sort of somatics in general. I mean, I think about the use of breathing. And one of the sort of tools that I try to use is deep breathing if that's available to somebody. And I've worked with some families that say, I just don't have time to do that. Is there a way that we can enlist somebody else to help with that? Is there a partner? Is there a young child? Can we make it more fun and interactive? How can we sort of reach out to those natural supports? Is there a way for us to document and say that this has not been helpful or this has been helpful to this birthing person? One of the things and sort of lines that I use is, I know breathing is so hard and it's really hard to sort of notice your breath and take the time to sort of breathe in and out in a way that makes you feel calm. And what we know is that during your labor and delivery process, that's really going to help you. And how can we start to practice that now? Are there ways that we can sort of lean into that in a different way? Can we call it something different? Is there a way to sort of engage in that in a different way? Is there a different way to be mindful? I feel like mindfulness can be a catch-all term in different ways. And so, but there is a lot of truth to that. How can we sort of be mindful of what's happening in the here and now? And I think about that in particular in this baby that's coming. And that's part of the attunement and engagement as well. And I think about that as also related to the health and well-being in a bidirectional way for both parties involved.
I have a quick question. I had a client who had a lot of pain in her pregnancy, a lot of just like body pain due to the baby and just like pelvic pain and things. And also has some like older kiddos. And she really had a hard time connecting with the baby. Do you have any thoughts or ways that you help with that process?
Yeah, that's such a good question and sort of point. I mean, one of the things that comes up is when people have really hard pregnancies is, I've been pregnant before and it wasn't like this, or this is the worst it's ever been. And so one of the psychoeducation pieces around that is really every pregnancy and every labor delivery experience can be very different, but also really validating that this one feels different and it doesn't feel comfortable. I think that there is a lot of power in sort of going there and being really present with the person as much as possible. I'm so sorry that you are having so much pain. Of course, always, and again, this is like that teamwork sort of framework. Is there a medical reason that there might be additional pain? How can we sort of empower this birthing person to sort of check in with the medical providers around this? Are there ways that you can accompany and sort of be an advocate in that way? Are there ways that you can empower that birthing person to sort of ask those questions during a prenatal visit? Ask the PHN, ask somebody that, you know, really could benefit from being able to do that. I think sort of sitting with and validating, really being present with somebody and like acknowledging that they're having a challenging time. And then sort of like wondering about what impact do you imagine that this has on your baby? The other part is, are they attributing the pain to this baby? And that's something to sort of lean into and think about a little bit more. This baby is going to be terrible because they are causing me so much pain. And then wondering about that. What does terrible mean? Do you feel like this might be sort of similar to somebody else in your life? Have you ever felt this quote unquote terrible feeling before? And when was that? And sort of leaning into that curiosity with that person and having that person sort of think about that in a wider range. How was that?
Yeah, I'm curious, how do you build that attachment with that baby if you're experiencing all that pain though? It's like, how do you get through that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it looks really different for different people. I think sort of acknowledging that the pain is there, acknowledging that, the baby is there also, and trying to, and I feel like in pregnancy, it can be really hard to sort of like separate the two out. Maybe it is that the baby is sort of sitting on the bladder and really causing a lot of pain, just as an example, right? And so how do we sort of think about that together? Are there ways that this birthing person, and I just said she, but I try to be very mindful and inclusive in that way and just say birthing person. So is there a way that this birthing person can massage the belly a little bit? And sort of then narrate and model and talk to the baby. Baby, I know that this is really hard on me and I feel terrible. And I want you to know that I know you're going to come, right? And I mean, this is best case scenario. And this is without knowing any of like the familial history. Are there other impacts related to culture that might be impacting this person? Are there psychosocial stressors that might be impacting, that are then sort of causing like maybe a somatic pain that is, in fact, maybe not due to pregnancy? It's so interconnected that oftentimes like it's the both and, like both of them go together. But I think just sort of bringing voice to that baby also and wondering about what that baby might be like. One of the questions I always lean into is, tell me about what you imagine for this baby. Do you have a name for the baby? And that will also sort of lean into how much this person is attaching or not attaching. Generally speaking, there are a lot of measures that you can sort of use also to think about attachment in particular. But I also think, one, not everyone has access to different types of measures in those ways. And two, are there ways that you can sort of bring the baby in your interactions with that one particular family? Haley, I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about this family, and we can sort of think about this family in particular, or without PHI.
I think you've answered it well enough. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And so I want to acknowledge that we can feel sometimes like we are in a difficult position and not sort of know. I definitely use colleagues in terms of consultation and sort of reaching out and thinking outside of the box as much as possible. I know that many of us have documentation requirements where we have to document the things that we do. And so how does that sort of impact the way that you might engage or not engage with somebody? In some areas, depending on sort of funding resources, like I know that you have to establish that there is a need. And so how do you sort of also establish that? And is there a way for you to acknowledge that the need is really within that attachment and that dyadic relationship that's happening right before your eyes? And thinking about that mutuality and bidirectionality of what's happening with the baby and that birthing person. I haven't seen any other questions or hands come up, so I'm going to move us forward. Does that seem right, Mia?
Sounds great.
So I want to sit us into a multi-generational family that I would like to share with you. This family is a family that I was a clinician for. I was a dyadic therapist. And this family is a family that immigrated from Central America. And what I want to share is what was shared to me in sort of meeting this family. This was a family that was referred to me through a medical social worker that worked with this family. And I want to acknowledge that sometimes in referrals, we don't get a full picture of what's actually happening. And that was very much the case in this referral. And so the referral came to me with somebody that had birth trauma and was having a hard time attaching to her current pregnancy. And so that's all I got. And it took a little bit of engagement on my part to engage this family because they, again, were immigrants. They were monolingual Spanish speaking. They were sort of coming into their own family of origin in a different way. So the case that I'm going to share with you is Kathy. Kathy came to me when she was 24 years old, and we met when she was about 19 weeks pregnant, 19 weeks plus. And when I met with her for the first time, it was in a community-based agency. So she came to me, and what I remember about her the most, it was a cold day and it was rainy, and I'm in California, so it just was windy and one of those days. And she was all bundled up, and it sort of gave me the sense like she wanted to be covered up in some way. And it just made me wonder what more there is. And holding in mind this referral question, this is somebody that is a birthing person. She identified as female, so I'll use she and her for this case. But Kathy, I knew that there was more to her story. She was 24 years old. She had a daughter that was 5. And what she said to me in our initial meeting was she was a result of a sexual assault, her 5-year-old daughter. And so if I do the math, then she was pregnant at 17, and she delivered her daughter when she was 18. This is somebody that was held, I'll use this word, captive, against her will, and was sexually assaulted and physically abused in a number of instances. The father of her 5-year-old daughter, her name was Daria. The father of Daria only allowed Kathy, when she was pregnant with Daria, to go to appointments when that male identified person allowed Kathy to. And so there would be days where she would say, I have a medical appointment and I need to go. And the person would say, well, I'm not going to let you go today. And then Kathy would not be able to attend her prenatal appointments. Kathy had a grandmother, and this was a Spanish-speaking case, who she identified as Mommy, and that was the person that she grew up with after Kathy's mother, Sandy, left her country of origin and left to the United States when Kathy was 3. So I'm already identifying in this first meeting with her that there are relational misfortunes that have happened. Her mother had to leave her at a very young age. I know that she had a grandmother, and so that was one of the multi-generational parts. I knew that she was a person that was held against her will and then had a baby as a result of that. And so I got to know Kathy, and it was a very special relationship. This is a case that I will hold in mind for as long as I will be able to. She came to me and was pregnant, and one of the first stories that she shared with me was her immigration story. And this was just sort of me prompting a question around, tell me a little bit about how it was to come to the US. And what she said to me, and I'll preference this with, there is a significant amount of trauma in this story, is that her brother helped her escape the person that held her captive, and as a result was murdered thereafter. And she didn't learn about this until she arrived to the US. And what she said was, when I was traveling, I remember crossing a river. And in this river, the people that were helping me, the coyotes, they told me to keep my daughter on my back. And I thought, and her daughter was 30 months old at this time. I thought, I can't keep her on my back, because if I do get shot at, they'll hit my back first, and then I won't have my baby. And this is what I need to do to protect her. And so the thing I was listening for is, was she present in her body when she was telling me the story? This was the first time meeting her. Was there a way that I could lean into that a little bit more with her? And the protective nature of her and her daughter, Daria. She was willing to risk her own life, and she was willing to do things that others advised her not to do, and others advised differently, and she was able to arrive here with her daughter. The next part of this story is that when she arrived to the US, she arrived and started living with her own mother, who she did not have a relationship with. So here, Kathy and Daria are living with Kathy's mother and Kathy's mother's partner, who is Kathy's stepfather, in a home for the first time together. And so that dynamic and having to really sort of navigate what that was like for Kathy and Daria. So I'll fast forward a bit to Kathy and her pregnancy. And so Kathy had a partner, and this was a planned pregnancy. She really wanted a baby with her partner, and her partner wanted a baby as well. And what happened was that her and her partner would often get into arguments. One of the things that I did with Kathy, and I often do in my work, is invite partners in. And this was really Kathy's sort of, it was up to Kathy whether or not she wanted her partner to be here, her partner, Oscar. And Kathy said, no, this is a time for me and my space, and I want this space to be just for me. Okay. And so it was a question, and what I asked her permission, would it be okay to ask about this again? Maybe there is a time we could include Oscar, and maybe it will be helpful to you and the baby. And so Kathy shared with me again in this first session, next week I have my ultrasound and I'll learn what this baby will be. And we thought about that, and we wondered about what would it be like to have a daughter, again, another daughter. What would it be like to have a son? And she worried about having a daughter because of her own history of sexual assault. And then she worried about having a son because of her own history of being physically and emotionally and sexually assaulted by a male identified person. And there was some domestic violence in her current relationship with her partner. It had not gone physical, but there were many verbal altercations in which she said was insults between her and her partner. And so she worried about that and what it would be like to bring in a male into this world. And so I said, if you would like me to go, I can go to the ultrasound with you. And she said, well, let me see if Oscar can meet me there. And I might have to let you know last minute. Is that okay? And I said, yes, sure. I'll just plan to be mostly available during that time. And so sure enough, she let me know at the very last minute. And she said, I'm already running late. Oscar and I got into argument. I got out of the car and I'm catching the bus there. I'll be there soon. I said, I'll meet you downstairs. Just let me know when you get there. And so I did. And so I went into the ultrasound with her consent, and we learned that she was going to have a boy. And we thought about what that was going to be in light of her history. And we thought about what that was going to be in light of her current relationship and what that would be like to share with her partner, Oscar, who didn't come. So moving forward, that was about 20-ish weeks. At around 30 weeks, she was part of a centering pregnancy group. And in this group, there was prenatal care. She was not a high-risk pregnancy. And she was in a group with people that were around the same gestational age as her. And so was, in theory, sort of going through the most typical sort of circumstances of pregnancy amongst a group of other people that were also going through the similar things. So one day she comes into my office and we think together about her prior pregnancy and prior labor and delivery experience. And then we had thought about this before and she didn't really want to go into detail. And then we went into detail. And part of the reason why I'm bringing this up is because of the worry that she carried around having a very similar labor and delivery experience. And what her prenatal midwife provider told her was that every pregnancy is different and this one will be just fine. Everything seems to be going okay. And so I also want to hold the perspective of sometimes people don't want to just hear that everything will be okay, and wondering with them that there could be things that happen that are unexpected and not anticipated, and ways in which we want to sit in that with them. It can be very, very difficult for people to hear that, well, it's not common, or what you went through was not common. And so the only thing I knew about her prior labor and delivery experience was that it was traumatic and that she had eclampsia. And there was no other symptoms before that. But again, this was somebody that was not able to attend prenatal visits because of her circumstances. So she tells me that I was able to get away that day. I was able to go to my mommy's house, her grandmother, and I was there and I was in so much pain. I knew the contractions were coming, and my brother was there, my little brother. And my little brother, they were making fun of me because they said I couldn't take the pain, but this pain was different. This pain was more than I had ever gone through before. And then I went into my old room, and there I just laid down and I wanted to rest. And then I got a really bad pain. And so I got up and I walked out to the front room, and my mommy and my brother, they were there. And then all of a sudden there was a gush of water, and I realized that my water broke. And my mommy, she told me, go take a bath, go clean up before we go to the doctors, before we go to the hospital and you have this baby. But I was in so much pain, I just wanted to change my underwear, and I just did that because I was wearing a dress and that was most comfortable. And so I did that. And then I went to the hospital. And because I knew Kathy and I knew to listen for this, her pacing really, really increased. And I knew that some of that worry was coming in. And so what I did was try to slow it down. How did you get there, Kathy? Tell me a little bit about that. I know you didn't have a car. And so entering into sort of the here and now of her present sort of dialogue with me and her storytelling, her narrative. And also making sure that she was sort of in her body and space in that time as well. Because one of the things that we worry about in particular when there's trauma and there's a trauma narrative is dissociation. And so I wanted to make sure that she was present and there with me. And so she tells me that a neighbor took her. And she said, I remember in the car, my mommy, she told me, Kathy, whatever you do, just don't go to sleep. As tired as you may get, don't go to sleep. Don't let the sleep take over. And in Kathy's country of origin, what she shared with me is that when I arrived to the hospital, they took me back, and my mommy, she had to wait in the waiting room, and it was just me, and I was all by myself. But luckily there was a nurse that I recognized that I had gone to school with when I was young, and she was in the room there with me. And all I remember was there was a lot of blood and people were yelling. The doctor, he was the only male there. He was delivering the baby and he yelled at me and he told me I wasn't doing it right. And that one nurse that was there that I knew from school, she told me, just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a good job. You're right. I'm right here with you. I'm not going to leave. And all I heard was yelling. All of a sudden, all I saw was blood and just sort of towels of blood coming from me and going to a dish. And so then I passed out. I tried to not let the sleep take over, but I passed out. And all I remember was sort of waking up in and out. And again, I sort of check in with her about how she is, because I want to make sure that she's sort of in the here and now with me. She realizes she's telling me the story. This is her story and her narrative. And she's not dissociating and she's present. So she continues on with her story about how she eventually got to meet the baby, Daria, and that she was eventually okay and she was in the hospital for a couple of weeks. And she just remembers sort of like moments of time, sometimes the baby there, sometimes the baby not being there. And she tells me that she wanted to share this with me on this particular day because she had just shared this in her centering pregnancy group. And she felt that she didn't get to share it in enough detail and wanted to let me know about it beforehand. So we think about that and we hold that in mind for a little bit. And from then on, and again, we're at 30 weeks. And so between 33 and 36 weeks, we move into a different space and I offer her a tour of the labor and delivery space. I'm holding in mind this narrative that she shared with me about her traumatic labor and delivery experience, holding in mind that she was alone and she didn't know what was happening and she had no control in that situation. And so my objective in doing a tour of labor and delivery with her specifically was around sort of that emotional regulation, giving her as much control as she could have and sort of planning with her a bit. And this is also alongside her public health nurse that we had gotten her engaged with, her nurse midwife, that she really hoped would be in the labor room with her, and also just being able to provide a little bit of psychoeducation about what it could be like. And so in the tour of labor and delivery, I tell her exactly how she'll arrive, where to go. She had brought her daughter Daria with her that day. And Daria is super excited to see what this space and room will be like and sort of moving about very quickly. And I'm really trying to be aware of this 5-year-old that's running around with us and this birthing person that I know has so much worry about her birthing and labor experience. And so we look at the unit, I tell her about the different monitors, I show her the room that she could be in and that all the rooms look pretty similar. I show her where the bathroom is, and Daria all of a sudden says, look out the window. And then mom leans into me and she just starts crying. And she says, I don't know what's happening. I am feeling so much right now. And noticing that there's a 5-year-old in the room who then comes running over and says, Mommy, what's wrong? And noticing that I have this person that's really crying into my arms. And I say to Daria, mom is scared and she's excited and she's worried about what might happen. And she's having so many memories of what had happened before. And she wants the best for you. And she wants the best for your brother, whose name was going to be Daryl, very close to Daria. And she wants to make sure that things are going to be just right for everybody. And mom was able to regulate, and I really helped co-regulate her and the worry of that 5-year-old that was also there. And so she wanted to continue the tour. And once we were out of sort of that unit, she said to me, the nerves just took over. And I'm so glad that you were there and you were able to sort of help and explain to me what I could expect and what I could anticipate. And the next process was really sort of planning. If Oscar can't bring you to the hospital, because that was her wish and she wanted Oscar to be in the room with her, then who else? And so we have a list of everyone that she could call in the event that Oscar was not ready and available, and really thought about what her experience could be like. And she said that she wanted me to be there as much as I could or as long as possible, and that she would let me know that she's ready to go into labor and delivery. And as we know, things are very unexpected in labor and delivery. And she arrived and I didn't get a call, but she texted me a few days later and she said, I had the baby, but the baby's in the NICU. The baby had swallowed some feces while I was going through labor and delivery. And now the baby's in the NICU and everyone is blaming me. Oscar is blaming me, his mom is blaming me, and I just feel terrible. And so I had met Oscar before that. I had done a labor and delivery tour with him as well, and to help Kathy. And so I met them there again and we thought about it. I had gotten a call from the nurses in labor and delivery because they had loud voices, was the way that it was framed to me, and they were worried about escalating DV. And so I thought with both caregivers that were Spanish speaking about what that was like and what they hoped for this baby and the things that they wanted to contribute for this baby and how they wanted this baby to be healthy and the worry that was coming out, and how that was coming out differently for each person in their family. And they were able to regulate. They were able to then eventually go home. I was able to do a home visit with this family, and I was able to meet Kathy's mom, and I was able to meet Kathy's dog. And by this time, Kathy had more members of her family and her extended family, her stepfather's family, in the home. And so there was a lot of people in that home by this point. There was Kathy's stepfather's son, and then his partner and their baby, plus Kathy, her partner, Oscar, their daughter, well, Kathy's daughter, Daria, and then Daryl, who was brand new to this family. And I want to also sort of acknowledge that this was a family I really was able to have a longer sort of term experience with. In total, we were together for about 9 months. About 9 months, because we met early in Kathy's pregnancy, and we were able to do a little bit of work after Daryl was born. And so I'm aware of the time and want to be respectful. So I'll share one more instance, and this is around really how to include and acknowledge the different members of the family and being present in the setting of domestic violence. So at this site where I was able to see Kathy and her family, there was a built-in daycare setting there. And sometimes Kathy would decide to leave the children in daycare so she could really have her own space and time with me, and the children could be cared for, and Kathy could be as expressive as she wanted to be with me in any given setting. And so one day I meet them and I take them back to our meeting space. And Kathy was a little bit different. It was hard to know what was happening, and I tried to ask in a way that was respectful and acknowledging that both children were there. The baby was in the stroller and Daria was playing on the ground with some toys. And then Kathy starts to share with me that there was an argument over the weekend. And she says that things got really bad and that people were yelling and people were screaming. And then she says that Daria was crying. And without any other sort of mention, Daria says, I was crying a lot, and looks right at me. And then all of a sudden, the baby starts moving around and fussing a little bit in the stroller. And in that moment, I knew that everybody was very present with me and sort of wanting to share what their experience was like during the weekend when there was a fight between Kathy and her partner, Oscar. And so I turn to Daria and I say, Daria, you were crying and you were crying a lot. And I turn to Daryl and I say, Daryl, it was scary and it was really uncomfortable to hear your mom and dad arguing back and forth. And it's really scary when adults yell and use words that are not nice. And Kathy, how was it for you to hold and be the adult and be there with your two young children and now be here with me now? And so we went on and we continued. We eventually ended our work because my contract was up with that particular agency. And she knew where I would be going next. And I was also still in training. And she reached out several months later and she asked for me to call her back, which I did. And what she said was, I wanted to share with you that Oscar finally moved out. I was finally able to get him to move out. And I wanted you to know that we're okay. And that with your help and with the help of talking and learning how to talk with Daria and Daryl, that together we were able to get through this and that we are still united and that I'm okay. And that's my multi-generational family with kids from very young and with the grandmother and step-grandfather and with the dog and many other members in that family. I do see some numbers in the chat now, Mia.
Yeah, so there's two questions, but they're not directly related to the content you just shared. And so someone made a comment, wow, such a touching story. Thank you so much for sharing. And the other two questions aren't about this. Do you want to pause for a second or you'd like me to read them?
We can pause for a second if there's anything else that folks want to say about this sharing in this case, or if not, then we can move into the other questions.
Okay. I don't see anything in chat. Yeah, so these are came through just of gratitude for sharing the story. So Rosemary has two questions. The first is, I work with a lot of families who are new to the US. One of the major struggles I see during pregnancy and postpartum is the experience of loneliness and loss of tangible support. The pregnancy seems to highlight homesickness and missing their family. I will often encourage building some new community supports with church, support groups, etc., as well as encouraging reaching out electronically to their family for distant support. Do you have any other suggestions for helping immigrant families build their support networks?
I really love that question. I mean, I think all of the things that you're doing sound amazing. And those are really a lot of the ways that I try to encourage families. Sometimes in some community agencies, there are groups to sort of like get to know, like groups knowing about pregnancy groups. I'm thinking about like lactation groups. I'm also thinking about sort of like knowing your baby groups, depending on what that looks like in your community. But thinking about different group interactions, and maybe there's a way to sort of build more community in a group setting. I think that for a lot of immigrant families, they are not so accustomed to sort of a group model, and that can be really challenging. But sometimes families will really lean into that space about this is really for you and the baby together, and this will really help the baby. And sometimes there's groups around like babies and reading, and this will help the baby sort of moving forward. So are there ways to sort of do that together in a group setting? And then the other piece around that also is, even in this multi-generational family that I shared with Kathy, we thought about, I spoke about the ghosts and angels, the ghosts in the nursery and angels in the nursery before. And there were many ghosts in Kathy's life. And there was a couple of angels. And so leaning into those angels, one of them was her grandmother that had since passed away. And then one of them was an aunt that she was able to call and speak to. And the grandmother we sort of held in mind because she had passed away, and thinking about what is it that you would want to share about your grandmother to your children. And that really sort of brings in a cultural piece, a historical piece, and ways to really sort of highlight that strength in that relationship that was actually a very positive relationship for Kathy in this case.
Thanks. The second question is about helping the non-pregnant parent, and this person says that they're typically working with male-identified folks to bond with the pregnancy. And then she says, I often recommend reading, singing, talking to the belly, as well as attending prenatal appointments, but would be interested in any other ideas that you have.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are all wonderful ideas. I think one of the other things is if you're able to sort of include them in your work with this pregnant person, that's always ideal. Oftentimes, it's not until sort of like the labor and delivery experience where I get to meet the partners. And oftentimes there's so much more work that could be done beforehand. I'm thinking about a different case where it was in the midst of the pandemic, and I was not yet on site. And so it was all via phone. And that was at the patient's request. I offered telehealth video via video conferencing, and they preferred phone. And so it was, how do we incorporate a time that also includes your partner? What are questions that your partner has? And sort of thinking about what are things, because in this situation that you're sort of asking about, it seems like the partner is actually involved in different ways. And so what are things about the partner's history that are important and that the partner might want to share with this baby, and sort of incorporating it in those ways as well. A lot of the things, if there are partners involved, that we do with the pregnant person, if there's space and opportunity to do that with that partner, then that's the most ideal situation. And so bringing them in, and again, the question is, who is the client, right? Who is your patient? And so sort of thinking about the identified person that you are in sort of treatment with, and then how to incorporate other natural supports around that.
There's one more comment. Thank you for sharing this story. I think the power of your work is so much in attunement and modeling attunement and communication for the family and the different family members.
Thank you. Yes. I mean, there's so much of that. For those of us that work with children, it's often engaging with what is right in front of us. And so being very curious and wondering, I try very much so to instill hope and future. If I think about a family where there's sort of depressive symptomatology, right? How can we be a little bit future oriented? And maybe that's just next week, and that's okay. Maybe that's just later on today, but sort of thinking about that moving forward.
Thanks. That's all for the questions in chat.
Great. So those were our questions. I'm happy to see about whether or not there's more questions in this time that we have. And I'll also show my my references here, just sort of listed. I really hold a cultural perspective and sort of thinking about where this family is coming from. And we know each family is individual, but very much holding that front and center and learning about that particular family. Again, I really come from a psychodynamic sort of framework and really think about history and historical transmissions of trauma. And then also really thinking about the hope, and the hope, sometimes we think about angels and sometimes we think about moving forward. And a couple of books in my reference log, Make Room for Baby, that's a perinatal child parent psychotherapy perspective, and then a relationship focus that pays, that's the parent-child relationship competencies that have really helped and are bidirectional. And there is a sort of like a rating scale, and that's not intended for you to sort of share with anyone. It's a strength-based perspective, but really it's sort of utilize for yourself in your work with dyads.
Thank you so much, Lauren. There's a request to share contact information. I'll leave that up to you if you feel comfortable with that. And we just have another moment, but I want to say thank you so much to Lauren for being here with us and sharing expertise and taking the time. And if there's any last comments, you're welcome to put them in the chat or unmute yourself. And if not, we'll begin to wrap up. Lots of gratitude in the chat for you, Lauren.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here and hearing about this family, this sharing. Mia, I'm happy to send you my contact information. I think you already have it, but I can send that to you and you can formally send it out.
Great. Thanks so much. Looks like there aren't any other questions, and so we will close down the space in just a moment. Thank you all. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Monday.